What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian, and if you don't know, I'm a software developer in my day job. I'm actually an iOS developer, more specifically, and I actually carry around two M1 MacBook Pros pretty much everywhere that I go. I thought it'd be kind of cool to make a video talking about the cool apps and unique apps that I use and the way that I set up my MacBook Pro for development specifically, just because it's something I'm very used to doing every single day. Let's talk quickly about how I set up my MacBook Pro from the system. So first of all, everything is dark mode because one, I like my eyeballs, and two, I just think it looks better for pretty much every purpose. Sometimes you'll see me using light mode in B-roll on these videos. Most of the time that's just because it's easier to film the lighter screen, it's easier to get the details in, but on my actual day-to-day use, everything's dark mode. The next thing is going to be a little bit controversial, but I actually use and run Safari as my main web browser through everything always. There's a couple reasons for this. The main one being that when you're doing iOS development, making iPhone apps, you have a simulator, so you can basically emulate an iPhone and do a bunch of things on an iPhone that's just running on your MacBook. And that iPhone simulator comes with Safari pre-installed, so it's just a lot easier to kind of bounce between the two, share links and things like that between the simulator and like my actual environment. So for that reason, it's just easier to be a developer if you're using Safari, in my opinion, if you're doing things like iOS development. And of course, lastly, you have to make sure you have a cool wallpaper. Shameless plug, I do have a wallpaper pack available on Gumroad. It's some pretty cool, minimal, and colorful wallpapers. It's called Colors and Curves. It's less than 10 bucks. You can go pick it up if you want. All the stuff you're gonna see in this video, if you see a wallpaper, it's gonna be from that pack. Tot is basically a really minimal and easy to use notepad, I would say. I wouldn't categorize this as like a note app or a notes app because it's so minimal in what it can do. So the way that Tot works is essentially it lives as a menu bar item, so you can go up to the top of your MacBook and open it at any time. And the reason I love this is I basically use Tot as a place to just like throw down thoughts, code blobs, literally anything that's on my mind that I just kind of want to store away for a little bit, I just throw here. There's really no organization. There's really no structure to how Tot works. You basically just like vomit onto the notepad and then everything lives there until you delete it. There's 7 dots that each represent a page in Tot, and that's it. You can only have 7 pages. You can't have more, you can't have less. You basically have 7 there all the time. And the interesting thing is the way that Tot works is like every dot is colored. So there's like an accent color, blue, green, red, orange, whatever. And all of the stuff on the page is kind of like tinted that color to match the dots that you're on. The other cool thing about Tot is it does support Markdown. So if you are a software developer or somebody who just uses Markdown a lot, think like headers, paragraph styles, bold, italic, those kind of things. Tot does support that. You can toggle between the Markdown and the plain text views if you want to. I just keep mine in Markdown all the time because I can paste code blobs directly into it. But essentially, Tot is just a quick way to jot down notes or anything on your mind, basically at any time. Continuing on the trend of minimal apps, Color Slurp is going to be the next one, and this also lives as a menu bar item, so you can basically select any color of anything at any time. A really common thing that I have to do as a software developer is like work in designs and also design my own screens. So Color Slurp basically allows me to pick a color from any pixel on my screen at any time. And the way that it does this is you actually have to give Color Slurp screen recording permissions because it has to be able to like actually read the pixels on your screen to select the color codes. So if you don't like that, if that's a privacy concern for you, this probably won't work. It doesn't really bother me just because I'm just basically picking color codes, and it's a pretty trusted program. If you press Command-Shift-M, that also opens up the color picker. So if you don't want to go up to the menu bar, you can do it that way. And there's also a lot of other features inside Color Slurp besides just picking color codes. You can do things like palettes. If you want to have like a certain array of colors for like your app, say you have like a primary, secondary, tertiary colors, you can keep all of those in a palette if you want to. And you can also do contrast checking. So if you're worried about accessibility, is this text legible on this background color? You can do all that through Color Slurp as well. And of course, Color Slurp is free, as is Tot. I think actually every program that I'm going to talk about today is free. I don't like paying for programs. Figma is going to be the last one we're going to talk about in terms of design. And Figma, if you don't know, is the pinnacle or one of the top competitors in the space right now for UI design. So basically all the websites you're seeing nowadays, all the apps you're seeing nowadays, there's like an 80% chance that they've been designed in Figma, at least in some parts. There's kind of 2 competitors in the space, Figma and Sketch. Figma is completely free, so you know which one that I went with. And the way that Figma works is it's basically built around the idea of building UIs. So websites, apps, even things like pamphlets, printable things. It's less about photo editing, think like Photoshop Lightroom, and more about interface design, fonts, colors, the way that the websites and apps work, like the actual interactions, you can mock those. It's basically like the place to design your apps and websites. I've been working on a startup in the creator space for a while, and I've designed both the website and the app through Figma, so it's pretty flexible. Now, if you're somebody who uses your terminal in any capacity on your MacBook, I would 1000% recommend you download iTerm. iTerm is just a cleaner, easier to use terminal for your MacBook, but the thing that makes it really special is downloading a plugin on top of that called Oh My ZSH. ZSH basically allows your terminal to become super powered, I would say. You can do things like plugins, colors, themes. The most important thing for me is if you've ever worked in GitHub or you've worked on a code base, you can actually see what branch you're in, so you can keep track of where you're at with your code, which is something that doesn't come by default with the native terminal. ZSH is something that I will literally not ever have again. I'll always use it on every terminal that I ever use from now until ever, just because it's so helpful to see where everything is all at once. And of course, you can configure everything to be like exactly your style if you don't like the default one that it comes with. The best part about ZSH and iTerm, they're both completely free. ZSH is open source, and you can actually go online right now and look at the code source if you wanted to. Visual Studio Code is my go-to for designing backends and websites. Like I said, I've been working on a startup in the creator space for a while now. Both the backend and the front-end website were both created in Visual Studio Code. VS Code can technically support any kind of just like text editing if you wanted to. You could just write notes in here if you wanted to, but it also supports an array of different languages from front-end to back-end languages if you want to program different code bases inside VS Code. It does have a dark mode, which is super cool for me. But like I said, the part that I like the most is I can switch from programming my front end in like React, HTML, that kind of stuff, and then switch over immediately to programming my back end in the same code editor, even though my back end is Python. Just like Figma, VS Code is kind of just like the gold standard in the programming world. So if you're interested in programming at all, I'd highly recommend at least downloading VS Code, kind of learning how it works, because there's a high chance if you ever do get a software development job or go work for somebody who's going to be doing software development, VS Code is going to be something you're going to be seeing. Linear and Notion are things that I would put into the same category. Technically, they're two different apps. I'm like very certain you've probably heard of Notion before because every YouTuber ever has talked about their Notion YouTube workflow in some sort of video. But Linear is the other one that I think is also very interesting. So Linear we'll talk about first, and it is basically a beautiful representation of what software can be if it's done really well. Linear is mostly used for task tracking in what I would say like a team setting. So if you have small tasks that can be broken down and then moved along like a flow of like, we need to do this, we're doing this, it's in review, it's done. That kind of flow is something that I would use Linear for. Now, going back to bigger tasks, for example, a YouTube video, I use Notion for that, mainly because I feel like it's more suited towards longer term projects that have a lot more information on them rather than small little tasks that I put in Linear. So for example, like I said, a YouTube video, I'll create a task in Notion. I have a template that auto-generates my thumbnail placeholder, a title placeholder, and then the entire description. So things like the script, inspo, keywords, that kind of stuff. I won't go too into detail. Both Linear and Notion are very in-depth, complex programs with like tables, databases, a whole array of things that you could do. You can basically become a pro in Notion and Linear as a job. So if you want to look more into those, check those out. I'm just using it as surface level task tracking. Paw by Rapid API is, in my opinion, the most minimal and best way to inspect network requests. It sounds super boring, but if you are a software developer and you're ever going to be sending network requests to your backend from a client like a website or an app, this is going to be a program you're going to want to use. There's other ones out there. Postman is like the largest one in the space, but in my opinion, it's just become a little bit too cluttered for what I'm really using it for. So Paw basically lets you do everything that a normal client would do. You can send requests, you can inspect the responses, you can mock data, you can pretty much simulate an entire client straight from Paw. The other cool thing is it has a ton of configuration. So if you have different servers, like a production server or a staging or development server, you can actually keep the same endpoints and then just switch between the servers, and it'll actually adjust what URL it's actually sending the request to automatically. You can do other things, of course. You can tokenize your parameters. You can create documentation from your API requests. You can basically document and use your entire backend from PAW without ever touching a real client, which is super helpful. If you're ever a software developer, you know how much time you spend inspecting these kind of things to see if you can blame the backend team for your problems or if it's your problem. And lastly, this is not going to be an app, but it's probably going to get a lot of people riled up. I actually use my default Apple peripherals when I'm programming. So I do have a $350 GMMK Pro that's fully aluminum, super heavy, customized, lube switches, the whole deal. And I still prefer to use the Magic Keyboard and Magic Mouse or even the Magic Trackpad when I'm programming. I don't know why. There's just like something that feels more right about using like the low profile switches and the minimal mouse and trackpad when I'm programming. I can't explain it. To me, mechanical keyboards are more towards like gaming, and like when I'm working on a Windows computer, it feels more like rough or not well-rounded. I can't explain it, but to me, the Magic peripherals are just really good. And that's pretty much going to be it. I know there's a ton of other cool programs out there. I really wanted to touch specifically on software development ones. I'll probably make another video in the future about just cool programs in general for your MacBook. So if you have any you want to recommend down in the comments below, let me know. I'm always looking to find more. Other than that, it's September. Apple products are about to be coming out. Super excited for that. So if you want to see some Apple reviews on this channel, hit the subscribe button. Check out my wallpaper pack if you want to. And that's it for me today, guys. See you in the next one. Peace.